And then when the commission meetings come, we need to step up and be as loud as the squeaky wheel on the other side and lean on the science and lean on the model. You don't have to take our word for it. We have a 100-year track record of wildlife management, bringing species back from the brink of extinction. That's why we have so much game right now. That's why they see so much wildlife, is because we brought it back and we manage for population levels.
What is up, everybody? Gonna jump right into this one. I've got Sawyer Briel to my right, repeat co-host. Sawyer, thank you for joining us once again.
I'm back and I'm fired up.
I'm fired up too, man. It is always a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure to have Mr. Brian Lynn from the Sportsmans Alliance across from us. If you haven't heard, which I think if you're a hunter, a lot of folks have heard by now, for all intents and purposes, the 2022 Washington State Spring Bear Hunt has been canceled. And so I guess to help us unpack the who, what, where, when, why, how of this happening, we've got Brian here to help us out.
For the people listening who might not be familiar with Sportsman's Alliance, I know you've mentioned obviously get involved locally, but can you just give the high-level view of what you guys are doing day in and day out to give them a little bit of context?
Yeah. No, we are an organization that has been around for a little over 40 years now, 1976, I think. Guess we're coming up on 50. From Ohio, we were born out of a ballot box initiative in the 70s. That's when the animal rights movement came into America and really started moving in, and they tried to end trapping in Ohio. We had some good old boys and some state biologists and businessmen that were all interested in like, whoa. And they all got together and they ran a campaign, defeated it. Then they all went back to their day jobs, and other states called in, were like, because they moved to another state and tried it. And they were moving to other states and trying this. And they were calling saying, hey, how did you defeat that? And that was the genesis for the Sportsmans Alliance. And from that, literally that's our mission, is to protect hunting, fishing, and trapping. And we do that at all 50 state legislatures, state and federal court, and at the ballot box. And it's literally like, that's our job, is to protect our passions, protect the heritage, specifically from the animal rights movement. But, anything that comes in that's going to impact us, sometimes it doesn't feel like an anti-hunting move, but a kennel restriction could put dog owners or breeders or trainers out of business, or make it so costly to do business, you and I can't afford a new puppy or to get a trained dog or to send a dog off for training. So that's a backdoor economic attack that they like to use, is to increase the price so much. As you increase the price, participation usually drops. So it's an economic attack. So that's what the Sportsman Alliance does. We are monitoring thousands of bills, legislative bills in all 50 states, from gun stuff to dogs to traps to whatever, and trying to kill it before it even gets legs. And then we'll get involved in lawsuits. We're in a couple of federal lawsuits with wolves, grizzly bears up in Alaska, public lands, with the moose and caribou stuff going on up there, and then we're part of the Jersey lawsuit for bears, on public land. We were fighting that battle for a while. We've been fighting the Great Lakes wolves there for 15 years or more. So yeah, we do it all, and we're small and lean, but we punch outside our weight class, as most people say.
So Brian, first off, again, welcome. And I guess our three main questions are, why was it canceled? How did this happen? And then what's the current situation? What's the current state of affairs? So what was the reasoning behind the cancellation of this hunt?
Well, the reasoning is kind of hard to deduct. It's pure emotion. There was no logic or science to it. But let's just back it up a little bit. This has been a contentious hunt for a couple of years, not based on any science, but just based on the animal rights movement targeting predator hunting, and Washington State being a very liberal green state, it's a great target. It's a rich target with a receptive audience and a lot of noise and a lot of people along especially the I-5 corridor, Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, and this has been a target. Like we were kind of talking before, I sat in on a HSUS webinar last year talking about how they were going to be targeting predator hunting in the Pacific Northwest.
And that's Humane Society, Brian.
Yes,
right?
Humane Society of the United States, not your local Humane Society chapters. That's a very big, distinct difference that needs to be made that people don't understand. They're not connected at all.
Definitely confusingly similar, and possibly by design. I don't know.
Yeah, and everybody thinks the Humane Society of the United States, capital H names, oversees all of your local humane shelters. They don't. They're not in charge of one single shelter in the nation. They co-opted the name and the idea, so people give them money thinking they're saving dogs and cats. They don't run one shelter. So your local shelters, if you want to support those, give locally and support those locally. Do not give the Humane Society. They are an animal rights movement that is working at the ballot box, the legislature, and courts everywhere to stop hunting, to stop animal use. But this has been a target. They've point blank made it a target. Predator hunting has been big for them for the last 10 years or more. The Pacific Northwest is a ripe target, the West Coast especially. So they've been trying to fight this. Last year, when they did this approval process, because they have to approve the regulations every year for this spring permit hunt, 2 women sued saying not enough public notice was given, so the hunt should be canceled. It went to court. The judge threw it out because it was in every major newspaper. It was posted on their website, distributed. There was no merit to it. But they're throwing the kitchen sink at it, trying to stop it. So got thrown out. They've just been planning for the last year how to stop this. And last January, Governor Jay Inslee appointed 2 people to open commission spots who are, for all intents and purposes, anti-hunting. The one is basically a biologist zookeeper from Woodland Park Zoo. And the other one was Washington Wildlife, whatever. She was the executive director, and it's protection of wolves, grizzly bears, black bears, and mountain lions. And literally like anti-hunting, and they were put into these positions. An Eastern Washington position is still left open. Those 2 people haven't been confirmed yet. And there's still one guy, the chairman of the commission, that needs to be reappointed. His term's been up for over a year. And so the commission is all out of whack, representation wise, unduly, Jay Inslee has more influence over their decisions by keeping them hanging on strings and, keeping people that he wants in there. And so he can affect these outcomes and push it to where they want to go. So when the vote came up, you basically have 2 anti-hunters and a guy who is being puppeted by the governor, who is usually a strong sportsman's voice, voted no, and another one voted no. And so it was a tie. So it didn't move forward. And that's basically just it. It was a regulation vote. And since it was tied, and it didn't pass. And so the spring hunt was canceled.
So the commission votes on that. And so you mentioned the word appointed there. So they're appointed. That's not a voted in position then?
Nope. The governor gets to appoint them, and then they have acting powers even before they're confirmed by the Senate, which they haven't been confirmed by the Senate. It'll be coming up on a year. They were appointed like January 4th, first week of January of this year. And so it's been almost a year. The Senate hasn't confirmed them yet. Maybe that's by design. Maybe it's not. I mean, Lorna Smith is far enough out there that there might be enough Democrat support for the hunting side that says, no, this isn't right. And she might not get confirmed, but it hasn't even gotten to that point. And it says that they are empowered to vote until they are confirmed.
Super interesting. So is the way, I mean, essentially the end result was, due to not coming to any sort of, official decision there because of, I guess, the 4-4 standoff. Is the way that happened unique, or does this potentially create a playbook for future challenges?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it's definitely like, so the commission is supposed to have 9 people on it. 3 in Eastern Washington, 3 in Western Washington, and 3 at large. The Eastern Washington, there's only 2 right now. The third slot has been left vacant for well over a year now, and nobody's been appointed. So there's no representation for the East, that third representation. All the other 6 spots, the 3 Western and the 3 at large, are all held by Western Washington commissioners. So you got dysfunction here. You have 4 and 4. You have a tie vote here, with how things usually shake out. So at best, it's a paralysis or a very confrontational situation with ties and stuff, especially with controversial stuff. It could be tied. It's creating a bad work environment, and it's not getting anything passed at best. And at worst, it opens the door for the anti-hunters to be able to manipulate wildlife management like this.
And it's a tough question to answer, I'm sure, Brian, but I know how our system's set up in Wisconsin, which is a fairly similar model to Washington, it sounds like. Is that system that they use there with kind of the appointees representing regions, would you say that's common in the U.S. or?
Yeah, usually, as far as I know, it's fairly common. It's usually supposed to be equitable and, science-based. Usually these state game agencies are supposed to be based on science, and the science presented supports it. I mean, point blank supports the hunt. The biologists were showing this. They pushed back. One of the commissioners said, well, we're not using any model to come up with this data. And the biologists immediately fired back. No, this is a model. It's an accepted model. It's been used before. We've used it before. We're collecting data. There's harvest data. There's hair snares. We know this. We're talking about 650 tags being offered in the spring, mostly in the Northeast and the Southeast, with scatterings around other places. Of those 650, about 150 bears are taken every year. The last year or two, one lactating female was checked in. They estimate that around less than 2% of cub mortality is due to hunters.
So it sounds like the long and short of it, Brian, is that this decision and how we got to this place was 100% based on opinions on hunting and support for hunting versus biology, carrying capacity, all of those things. So essentially they had this governing body that they used to make decisions like many other states do. And in this instance, and I know you guys have been fighting elsewhere, but I don't know if this is rare or not, but it was set up in a way with the folks that were on that board, had opinions, and were able to come to that 4-4 tie purely because they do not agree with hunting, specifically for bear in this instance.
Yeah. Yep. And this has been a tactic we've seen for a little bit now. It's becoming more and more popular as they try to change game commissions, and they're doing it nationwide. Vermont has been a big one. New Hampshire's been a big one. Like 3 years straight, we've defeated their attempts to change the board requirements or to create a board that oversees the board that oversees the game and fish department. They're just trying to water it down, and they're using the North American model against us in that they say that it's a public trust. Therefore, the public should have all the say. Everybody should be able to comment. So, they had the open comment period. They got the Humane Society of the United States and the other state-based groups put out the word, and hunters were shouted down 90-1. 90 comments to 1 comment. So the 2 anti-hunters who were appointed last January, Lorna Smith and Fred Kuntz, go, well, even if the science is good, which we don't believe it is, we see a social issue here. And there's a lot of people concerned about this. So I'm voting no. And that's it. Based on emotion, not based on science. The commission and the game department are supposed to use science-based decisions. They don't care. They just disregard it when it doesn't fit their paradigm.
So, Brian, do you guys, or does the commission or the Washington department, do they have access to any high-level data from folks in Washington support or open to hunting? Is there any data out there that kind of, okay, in Washington, 60% of people feel this way? Do you guys have access to that data?
We don't have that. That would be a polling issue to have to do. And then, polls can be skewed depending on where you do it. Like if you poll 1,000 people along the I-5 corridor, it's going to be very different than if you poll 1,000 people in the Columbia Basin or Eastern Washington, where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be completely different. What they have is, license sales, numbers of people, millions of dollars generated, and the hunt, their directive is to provide, recreational opportunities when it sound science and biological, data supports it. So this hunt was to support, recreational opportunities, to increase calf and fawn recruitment, and then to also protect where a lot of it is timber damage. The bears tearing up the trees to get to the sap layer in the spring and stuff. So there's a lot of timber damage that's being done. Those are the three primary reasons. The four commissioners really, just disregarded it and said, well, we really don't think it's much of a timber damage. We shouldn't be killing them because a lot of people don't want it done, and we'll figure out the other stuff later.
So to Mark's earlier question, Brian, where he said, does this kind of create a playbook? Would you say that in the instances that you guys have seen and you guys have gone to bat for hunters, is it common that these groups and folks looking to get rid of these seasons are typically finding creative administrative loopholes, red tape, versus coming some of the more high-level drumming up just support in general against hunting? Is it a mix, or are they mostly working behind the scenes, kind of finding these creative ways to get the same end without going out to the greater public?
Any and all. They're doing everything. I mean, they work at the ballot box. They work the legislatures hard, and they have a huge staff. I think Humane Society of the United States has more employees than NASA. I mean, they're huge. They're a $200 million a year budget for a non-profit organization.
100 million of that goes to Sarah McLachlan, oddly enough.
Yeah. That's actually ASPCA, which is another.
Dang it.
No,
I wanted to lighten it up a little bit. This is depressing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm still going to count it.
Okay, thank you.
We'll count it.
They're anti-hunting too. ASPCA actually has it in their mission statement to end hunting.
Well,
yeah. So
I'm unhappy with them too then.
Yeah, I mean, the unfortunate thing here is one unfortunate thing here. There's a lot is really it doesn't have to do at all with the health of the population, of the bear population or wildlife in general. It appears to me, pretty strongly that it's an anti-hunting play, not, and I think as a hunter, as a bear hunter, I love spring bear hunting. I like to eat spring bears. We do care about these populations. We do care about the animals. We want to see them flourish. I think if any way, shape, or form we thought that wasn't going to be happening, we'd probably be on the same side of the fence. Because we do care. We want these populations to flourish. We want them to be healthy. If you need to dial something back or dial it forward, depending on the science, then let's do that. But unfortunately, I don't think it was about that. And
Washington's bear population is robust. It's 20 to 30,000. So, 25,000, let's say, conservatively, because they use a conservative estimate. So, I've heard 30,000, but let's say 25,000, in the state that's very populated on the west side, and there is no threat to the population. There are calf and fawn recruitment issues across the board. We have black bears on the landscape. We have wolves here. We have mountain lions. We're starting to get grizzlies coming over, and then you throw coyotes in there too, so our ungulates are taking the hit, down in the Blues, which is the southeast corner, yeah, wolves and bears are taking them, but mountain lions are taking like 77% of the elk calves in the Blue Mountains.
Well, and a lot of the irony too is with more of those animals on the landscape, you've got more chance for pet encounters with these animals, human encounters with these animals. Like there's a lot of moving parts beyond just the habitat that I think people tend to forget as well. And
there was a person killed in North Bend a couple of years ago by a mountain lion, eaten from the hip to the knee. By the time the dog guys and the police got there, the cat had eaten it from its entire thigh down and stashed it. And they actually found the cat standing over the guy that he had killed and attacked another one. And then 2 months later in Oregon, just across the river and a little ways down, a hiker was killed by a mountain lion. So there was a biologist for the tribe or for the state, I guess for the state, who was put up a tree in Northeast Washington by a pack of wolves. They had to bring the helicopter in to save her. And the wolves were still around the tree when the helicopter came in. So yeah, you don't hear about this. They say it's rare, but it does happen. And there's a reason why it was rare. There weren't predators on the landscape to have it happen.
And I think the point I was trying to make there is I think a lot of folks think of hunting. It's like, well, these guys just want to go out and shoot something with their buddies, right? But there's so many factors at play with managing these species that I think people completely gloss over because they don't like hunting.
Right. It's hard to look at the facts when the facts point a philosophically, opposing direction of your viewpoints and how you feel. And I know we touched on this before a little bit, Brian, but as I understand it, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, their recommendation. So you've got these people that they're have devoted their lives and their careers to studying and managing these game populations.
And not all of those people hunt, and that's fine. That's the other very interesting part too.
That's a very interesting part. But their recommendation to the commission was to have the season. But that was ignored, and I think that's just important to kind of really, really hit on there because I feel like that's somewhat of a disconnect. I definitely want everybody represented and at the table because that's how we do things. But that just seems like a little bit of a disconnect there, and not sound management of these wildlife resources that are a public resource.
Yeah, without a doubt.
One thing you said earlier, Brian, I want to make sure I heard this right because I think this is also very interesting. You said the folks on one side showed up ready to speak against there even being a season, and the hunters that came to that same meeting showed up ready to talk about some of the nuances of the regulations and changes they'd like to see in the hunt. So how, excuse my French, Mark, how in the hell does that happen? What were there any warning signs or anything before this meeting that would have given anyone an inkling that, FYI, you better come ready to defend not your viewpoints on how you see regulation structure, but literally defending the season?
Yeah.
Was there any inkling that was even on the table or a?
No. And that's, I've heard I've heard several people behind the scenes say that was unethical. What just took place was unethical. I believe a commissioner even said it publicly that if we're going to have this discussion where this is a possibility, that should have been the point. So the hunters for 22 years have shown up every year to discuss, yes, we're going to lower tags available in this unit, increase them in this unit, reduce the number of days before a hide check, before you have to check the bear in. And that's what we were talking about. And then they were saying, geez, just make this an over the counter hunt, for God's sakes, because there's enough bears. And that's what they say every year. And that's what they deal with for the last 22 years straight. The other side always comes in and says, oh, cancel it. But this time it was coordinated, and they came in en masse, 90-1.
So
we were out commented.
did you talk to anyone in the room, Brian, to just kind of see like what the vibe was? Like, was there a point where the hunters in there commenting were like, oh my God, like this is not good. This is happening. Like what did that scene look like?
Yeah, I wasn't there, but I don't even think we were ready. Like the hunters weren't even prepared, didn't even think this was going to be discussed. Even I've heard commissioners say it, like there was two different playing fields taking place there. And the Kuntz and Barbara Baker and Lorna Smith, they're like, well, there's a social tolerance here that, we need to listen to. And a lot of people don't like this. So I'm voting no. Damn the science. Just an emotional response or a politically driven emotional, point.
And do you guys have any insight as to how kind of this mobilized and what that process looked like? Was it email? Was it social? Was it a letter campaign? Was it all of the above? I think you had mentioned some of the factors that played into Wisconsin or Washington. God, I hope not Wisconsin.
Ugh.
Washington becoming a target. Do you guys have a feel for, knowing that you've been in the trenches, like what does the spin up look like to something like this happening? Are we talking months? Are we talking a year? Like what does that organization, what does it look like?
I mean, it's they're so nefarious, with such long tentacles and a huge organization. They have people at every different meeting there is, commission meeting or committee meeting, anything, that it's almost hard for us to keep up with them, especially at the regulatory level, from the Sportsman's Alliance, but even local groups. And they can gin it up. They can gin up emotion in a heartbeat. I mean, just look at anything you've seen that's blown up on social media. It's very easy to get a soundbite to put a sow with a couple of cute little fuzzy cubs up there, or a wolf pack with little pups playing. It's an emotional response. They start playing on the, maternal stuff of orphaned cubs to die, weak mothers with cubs in tow coming out in the spring,
I worked for the Department of Natural Resources in Wisconsin for a number of years, and folks would, to your point, would show up to every committee meeting, conservation congress, all of that stuff. And for the most part, I think it was cordial, it was respectful on both sides. And to your point, Mark, like, absolutely come, like share your opinion. Like we're just as bad as the people we're talking about if we don't let everyone come and speak. But everyone I went to, it always ended with a biologist presenting on the science. This is why we're doing it. Everyone kind of had the kumbaya moment and is like, thank you for your feedback. This is what we're going to do based on the data that we have. That is why this is just so insane to me. I cannot get over how strange this whole situation is.
I mean, I was personally blindsided by it. Like, I guess in the back of your head, you're like, man, this is a possibility, right? But in some ways, it kind of feels like a boogeyman. You're like, yeah, you have these organizations, they're anti-hunting. Yes, they're out there, but, I know in my heart of hearts that the science backs this up. It's not going to happen. But it did. It did, and I think it's like, I'm from Washington State. That's my home state. So, I mean, I guess I have a personal attachment there. But even so, and I think it's also important to point out that it doesn't have to happen to be in your backyard to potentially affect you as a hunter or even a different type of user group down the road. I think there's a lot of broader implications here. And, so if you're a hunter, maybe you're like, well, I don't hunt bears, or maybe I don't live in Washington. I think you should still really perk up your ears because this is, like you said, Sawyer, I mean, this is definitely an interesting that did happen, has happened, and, could potentially open the floodgates for some things down the road. And so you better be paying attention. But I guess with that being said, Brian, I feel like I'm personally pretty in tune. I try to stay abreast of, issues and things like that. And like I said, I was blindsided. I had no idea that this was on the table, and it kind of sounds like a lot of people didn't, particularly because of, I guess, the the feedback that I'm seeing publicly by a lot of folks, online, social, petitions being started, things of that nature. I think a lot of people just didn't even know that this was a possibility.
I would agree. I mean, I live here even, and I wasn't even paying that close attention to it because I'm like, it's just a procedural thing.
And I think to your point, Mark, like, I would like to think that hunters aren't a selfish bunch. But again, you look at the spider web effect of something like this happening. If you're a hunter in Washington, you don't get to go bear hunting. That's kind of that is the people who seem to be most affected.
Right.
But if you deer hunt, elk hunt in Washington, ungulate population could get affected. Tags could go down. Your chances could get worse. If you live in a neighboring state that has bear hunting, guess what's going to happen to non-resident applications? Probably going to go up because they can't hunt in Washington anymore. So I think it's a lot of times it's just human nature. It's hard for people to think about some of these things because it's either 10 states away, doesn't affect me, things like that. I would say I'm guilty. Remember the New Jersey thing?
Oh yeah,
I remember seeing it and be like, wow, that's horrible. And that's kind of the extent to which I thought about it. Guilty,
Mm-hmm.
It just stinks.
But like you said, I mean, there is such a spider web effect there, even on the other game populations, as it relates to, I guess you can even speak to predators and predator management as a whole collectively. But it's like those things have a direct impact on the ungulate populations. So, and if you're not meeting, game management is a holistic approach, right?
Balance.
You can't. You gotta manage it as a whole. Predators are part of that plan, and you can't exclude them. That's just it's not going to work if you do that.
Here's what's scary though is there are biologists within Washington Department of Fish and Game who are against hunting. Much of the Washington Department of Fish and Game does not support hunting. There is even talk at the commissioner level to change the mission statement of Washington Department of Fish and Game away from consumptive use to non-consumptive use.
Oh, wow.
That's how bad this is. And that's what's taking place in this state and other states. You can call it the greening of it. You can call it the ecology side, whatever you want to call it. But they're moving away from, or trying to push them away from hunting and away from the North American model. This idea that everything needs to be on the landscape, nature will balance itself. They're trying to remove us, the hunters and anglers and trappers, the consumptive users who fund the North American model, trying to remove us from the model, put the predators in, and act like nature will balance itself, which is the greatest myth there is. It's not a Disney movie. It'll balance itself up and down. It goes through booms and busts. A good spring, you have a good prey base recruitment, begets more predators. Pretty soon, a hard winter, whatever, that prey base drops. Predators start to die, but before they die, they're going to come after cattle. They're going to come after pets. They're going to do whatever they have to do to live. It's breaking the model. They're trying to break the model and remove hunters, remove conservation, and move from conservation to preservation. And a lot of times those two terms get used interchangeably, especially in the media. Completely different preservation versus conservation mindset. Hands off versus actively managing and working with the land. And they're trying to break the model. They're doing it piece by piece, season by season, method by method, state by state. Wayne Pacelli, the former CEO of the Humane Society of the United States, said exactly that. He'll use the democratic process, the legislative process, and the courts, and go state by state, species by species to destroy hunting. He point blank said it.
We were talking a little bit earlier, backing up about kind of the, I guess, the mindset, of a lot of the folks that, were maybe, or not maybe, were opposed to the spring bear hunt, and a lot of that seems like it's based on misinformation and actually, active, campaigns disseminating misinformation to create that public perception, and then ultimately have happened what happened there. And I think if that's the information that's presented to you, like, oh my gosh, we're having an overabundance of, people are shooting sows with cubs, and cubs are being orphaned, and I've seen it's portrayed as trophy hunters. Trophy hunters are shooting lethargic bears coming out of their dens. I can tell you, I've spring bear hunted a fair amount. I've not once seen a lethargic bear, but I can see how that's extremely effective, because if that was my knowledge base on the subject, well, I might think that too. A lot of that stuff sounds really, really terrible, and like you said, you go back to the science from the biologists, from data gathered from the hunts. I think we can't ignore the fact that a lot of data that these biologists get is from bears taken or harvested by hunters. So that's where they're getting the data from. And that's important biological data. It's population data. It's the the health of that individual bear or the bear population as a group. I mean, they're getting a lot of information from that. But and part of that data, like you said, they're pointing to like, well, there was one sow that was lactating. But I'd be curious to know, that sow's cubs could have been killed by a boar earlier that week.
Yeah.
I don't, unless they have something to show that, nope, she had cubs with her, and a hunter took that bear and the cubs were orphaned that way. But cubs get orphaned a lot of different ways, or excuse me, they get killed a lot of different ways, and one of the biggest ways they get killed, or at least a way that they get killed, is by boars on the landscape that kill those cubs.
And I think to your point, Mark, kind of what you're getting at is, that, I know that, Brian, that.
Yeah.
And I think we make the assumption that everyone understands how all of this works, when that is just not the case at all. So are there more things that hunters and groups can do to educate folks? Absolutely. But it feels like the real heartburn for me is that this wasn't both teams were on level playing ground, both tried their best, and one happened to win. The problem with this one is it feels like the whole process was just unfair. Like, you don't want to cry over spilt milk, right? You got to move on and figure out what we're going to do. But that's really what stuck out to me. It just seemed like it wasn't an even playing ground where I think this. Okay, governing body, take all of that. Let's think about it. Let's talk about it. Make a decision. It was more, I have feedback on the regulations. Cancel the hunt. Like, it's like two football teams, and like only one knows that the other one's only going to have two players. Like it just feels so wrong. The whole thing just feels wrong.
Yeah, especially from the commission level down, with an open seat that hasn't been filled in over a year, with a guy who hasn't been reappointed, who's usually a strong sportsman's advocate, suddenly flipping, and two that were just appointed with no Senate confirmation yet.
Has there been any explanation why that seat for a representative on the east side of the state has not been filled? How long has that been empty for?
Over a year.
More than a year.
Yeah, no, there's been no inkling. I've heard of names being tossed around and, leading candidate and stuff. No trigger's been pulled. Inslee hasn't pulled the trigger and done it.
And I think that's stuff you'll see in other states. It's happened in Wisconsin. There's been some weird stuff. But I think it's only come to light here, obviously, because a very strange, horrible thing happened, But, like, hypothetically, Brian, if knowing what you know now and what happened, if you could get in a time machine to a month before that meeting, is there anything that could have been done to prevent this?
activating hunters more at that commission meeting, speaking up louder and more, the tonnage effect, getting more comments in, and focusing on what would happen, not micro down to the granular level of, oh, how many tags, how many days. It's no. We push back and fight. The sad thing is, would it make a difference? Because the ones who voted no, at least 3 out of the 4 don't care. Their minds are made up, and they were voting on ideology. So would it have made a difference? Probably not.
So, do you think in Washington specifically, knowing all of the things at play and the factors that you just discussed and the personalities at play, are other species at risk from a hunting standpoint in Washington?
I'd say yes. We got mountain lions. We got the wolves. Again, they're already starting to come up with the game management plan. And when the commission or the wolf committee was unanimous on the wolf rule, when to use lethal force and such, Center for Biological Diversity, Humane Society of the United States, they know Jay Inslee is an ally. They petitioned him. He came in and unilaterally overruled the commission and made them rework the wolf rule. He's done it with mountain lions. So they know that he's an ally, and he will push and help them. And this is where he's keeping it. So yeah, there's definitely issues, and there's definite other seasons at risk. And I mean, we've already lost hound hunting here, and we lost the bait. So your mountain lion populations are going up, even though the state guys like to say, well, we don't know it's going up. Well, it's pretty good indicators that there are going up, and other research out there, as well as, anecdotal incidents of conflicts with people going on. But as, again, we touched on it, your predator base starts going up with all these different predators on the landscape. They got to eat something, and that's going to be elk and deer. And they're taking hits, recruitment's taking hits, throw in some EHD that we got going through here. And the prey base is going to take huge hits, so that means reduction in tags and removal of hunters from the model.
Do you get the feeling that ungulates are on the radar or at risk, or is that too far-fetched?
No, because Lorna Smith said it in that wolf meeting about, or the elk in the Blues Mountains. She literally said it. Why are we jumping to predator management? With the greatest impact of this herd are hunters. So let's reduce the tags. And this used to be a trophy unit. There are still big bulls in there, but the Blues Mountains there in the watershed, there are big elk in there. But now there's a lot of wolves, but 77% of the calf kills are by mountain lions. And so you got mountain lions, wolves, and black bears in there. She literally said it in the commission meeting. Reduce the number of tags and reduce the goal of the herd size. So yeah, it's definitely on the radar. It's not even, on the radar. It's being put out there right now.
So serious risk of domino effect is what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny. I think it depends on how you perceive the human population. But what you described there just sounds like a great imbalance. Of essentially user groups of these game populations. And mentally for myself, like I consider the bears a user group of those ungulate populations. I consider the lions a group of those populations, the wolves, and myself. I throw myself in that mix as part of that equation. And it sounds like, there's definitely a large constituent of folks that say, no, we're different. Separate the human beings out, and I mean, like it or not, we're on the landscape too. So I mean, that's the way I look at it. Brian, is there anything that people can do to get this season back, the spring of 2022 season back? Like I said, I've seen some petitions. I personally signed a petition. I don't know what good that will do ultimately, but are there things that people can do to get that season back? and possibly even more realistically work towards getting the season reinstated in 2023?
Yeah, it's not looking good for the 2022 season. I mean, just to be honest, our lawyers are looking into it, short of a procedural issue that would invalidate it or cause a revote, which is there going to be any difference in the vote? Probably not, unless the vacant spot is filled. That would change the dynamic. So short of that, it's not looking great, just because even if there is litigation, we find something to sue on or whatever, that is a very slow way to go about things. And by next summer, we'll be having the same discussion for the 23 hunt. So we could spend the next 9 or 10 months litigating, burning $75,000, and either not have a vote or it gets approved. So we're looking at it, but it's not looking great for the 22 season, short of a procedural issue that we can bring up. Petitions, there's 2 different cycles of petitions out there. There's your change.org stuff. Doesn't really do much. I mean, those are great for headlines and the media likes them, but there's resident issue, non-resident issues, whether you have a say, whether they can even be put into a process, legislatively or through, comment periods. It's usually a feel good thing and a media thing, honestly. There's a state repeal process, but again, that's a repeal amend of a regulation that's been passed. This wasn't passed. So it's like proving a negative. You can't appeal. You can't petition to repeal or amend something that hasn't passed.
No, okay, and by when you're saying hasn't passed, that's kind of reflecting back on that 4-4 standoff, like just kind of nothing happened.
Oh, wow.
So
yeah, that is bizarre.
Yeah. So if it would have passed with some weird caveat, you can only shoot 3-legged bears or something, you could file this petition to amend that to say, no, 4-legged bears are okay, but this hasn't passed. So there's nothing to appeal or amend.
And I'm assuming it would be safe to say that there was a level of familiarity with that nuance in the rules, which could have been a reflection of the 4-4 and the vacancy.
Yeah. You would, if you want to put the tin hat on, which really isn't much of a tinfoil hat these days, then yeah.
I was thinking with my tinfoil hat, I just wasn't going to put it on.
I know.
I wasn't going to. I didn't want to wear it in front of everybody.
I want to be very clear that I am not the tinfoil hat guy. But
at this point in time, I don't even think it's tinfoil hat anymore. I mean, it's pretty blatant. You have 2 anti-hunters at minimum on the commission. You have a governor who hasn't appointed anybody else, who's keeping the chairman in limbo by not reappointing or putting someone else new in there. This is just political malfeasance, and it's just not on the up and up. So it's not a tinfoil hat conspiracy anymore.
Man, so let me ask this question, because and we touched on this a little bit before. I mean, my hope is that a lot of this, as it relates to public perception of, I guess, specifically to this topic, bear hunting or spring bear hunting, but also hunting as a whole, are there things that we can do better as hunters, or even if you're not a hunter but you are pro hunting, for hunting, to help, educate people so they, at the end of the day, at least they're making a more informed decision?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's what we have to do. It's, I've heard people call it your sphere of influence and stuff, where you can reach and touch those people and educate them. I mean, I did it last night. I went to a Inland Northwest Wildlife Council meeting and then came home, and my girlfriend's friend was there, and, she didn't know anything about it, and then I was talking to her about it, talking to her about mountain lions, talking to her about bears and management. And she was like, wow, I didn't know any of this, The more of that we can do, the better, just to educate people, educate as many people as you can, and then get involved with your local sportsmen's groups, like, the Northeast Washington Wildlife Council, the Inland Northwest Wildlife, whatever is in your area. Get involved with these groups. They do outreach, they do community projects, that gets press. And then when the commission meetings come, we need to step up and be as loud as the squeaky wheel on the other side, and lean on the science and lean on the model, and show that you don't have to take our word for it. We have a 100-year track record of wildlife management, bringing species back from the brink of extinction. That's why we have so much game right now. That's why they see so much wildlife, is because we brought it back and we manage for population levels. It's not going to be that way in the future if this happens.
And it's hard to see a silver lining here, and especially because it's so fresh. This just recently happened, but getting involved, even if you don't want to, going to the hearings, submitting comments, even if you're just doing it online, I think is something that does more than people think. And then the other trap that I feel like, and I'm guilty of this as well, I don't do a lot of bear hunting. I do a lot of other hunting. So when something with bear hunting comes up, I think people get stuck in that thought that, well, it doesn't really affect me. But you have to have the perspective of, they're going after bears right now. What's next? Mm-hmm. You can either get ahead of it, or it can be in your backyard next. So I think people lose sight of that a little bit too. Like, well, I'm not planning to hunt bears in Washington. Like, why do I care? Right. Well, they might be coming to your city next,
Right. And they do. They use each victory as leverage in PR campaigns in the next state. Well, Washington did this. Oregon, you need to step up and do this too. Washington people understood this. You guys need to get on board also. Oh, Washington and Oregon did this. Utah, Arizona, you need to do this too. And they'll take the spring season, then they'll come back for the fall season, or they'll come back to limit something or regulate something, or it's death by 1,000 cuts. Take a little, remove this cog from the North American model, remove this cog, remove this one. Pretty soon it breaks. The funding breaks, the balance breaks, the studies break, the population levels break, and it definitely is. But, even bear hunting, you want to see where it's going. Trapping. Trappers are on the front lines. It's been severely regulated, almost out of existence here in Washington. They are on the front lines. Trapping, hounds, and bait. Those are their three main targets that they go after. It's an easy sell. It seems unethical, even though it's not. It seems unethical, even to other hunters. I mean, on our page, we'll have people talking about, well, if you can't spot and stalk it, you don't need a dog, you're not a real hunter. Yes, there are biological reasons, there's ethical reasons, and this whole mentality of our different verticals within the hunting industry is going to kill us.
It was like that podcast we did with the guys from the Untamed about hunting with hounds. A lot of the same stuff. Mm-hmm. Be like, they're like the anti-hunters are against us, but we literally have people we know that hunt that are against it too. Right. So it's you're eating your own kind.
Yeah, I mean, at some point we have to link arms here, because I mean, hunting as a whole, no matter what you hunt, how you hunt it, it is interconnected. And, right now we're talking about this, in a silo as a Washington spring bear hunting issue, right? But like you said, Brian, it's a death by 1,000 cuts. At one time you could bait in Washington. Well, we'll chip that away. At one time you could hound hunt in Washington. We're going to chip that away. You brought up the trapping. That's been greatly chipped away. This is just the next piece of low-hanging fruit. It's just easy to activate. It's easy to twist public perception. It's easy to paint the picture that you want, right or wrong. And in this case, I think, undeniably wrong. But, and like I said, Washington, but there's lots of states that have spring bear hunts, and healthy spring bear populations or whatever. And you just can't look at this as like, oh, that's a Washington spring bear thing, because like I said, the much broader implications here. So what, we talked about things, that we can do to hopefully, educate the masses better. Are there things that we can do, as hunters within our own to better coordinate? Because it seems like these groups that oppose hunting do a fantastic job of coordinating efforts, and we're just kind of always behind. What can we do better to make our voices heard?
Yeah, getting involved at that local level with a local club, and then making sure you weigh in. I mean, we have to start weighing in and voicing our stuff. Where we work mostly at the legislative level, and come January, it's going to get busy again. We need to pick up the phones. We need to get active and do that. We put out alerts for the different things we're working on. And, a lot of times we're working behind the scenes where we don't even put alert out. We're trying to kill it before it even gets to that point. But when we do put an alert out, if I swear to God, like if 10 dudes picked up the phone and called in to the number we tell them, or email in to the people we tell them to, it's going to change minds. Like, they're not used to getting feedback on a lot of stuff, especially this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if 10 guys call in pissed off about this, they're going to go, whoa, that was 10 guys on this. I know there's 1,000 more out there, and they're looking for votes, and they're looking for other things. And they aren't going to want to risk their campaign on some for many, which seems like a small issue, but sporting dog regulations, or, how you do something, it's usually not a cross they want to die on. So if we make more noise, and they're either going to amend it or kill it. We need to get active. And there's like 15 of us that work at Sportsmans Alliance, and we're going head to head with Humane Society United States. We're doing all right.
No, we appreciate all the work, and I know definitely want to help, as I think about this, like as much as I can, right, Brian? And, we're talking about, okay, make your voice heard. And I know probably it differs, or likely, I would assume that it differs between states, possibly like how you can make your voice heard. And some of that is awareness, but are there some general places or avenues where a person can educate themselves on when and on what and how they can make their voice heard? Taking this one in particular, a month or 3 months or whatever before this decision was made, had I been aware that it was even on the table, I can guarantee you unequivocally I would have provided some sort of comment, right? But I didn't know, I wasn't made aware until after it was over, right? So how are there certain things that a person can look out for or investigate to make sure that they're keeping themselves abreast of these types of issues that are on the table, and make their voice heard and provide comment and hopefully have an impact?
Yeah, that's we work a lot at the legislative level. When you get down into the weeds of regulatory at every state level for all the different stuff, it does become onerous. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to do that better. That's where, being in tune with it, signing up for your state fish and game news releases and commission releases, and knowing when there's going to be a commission meeting or vote, or they have to almost, I think, in every state, solicit public comment, so getting those releases, that's where sometimes being a part of, a very local group that is active, they usually a lot of times have a good pulse on what's going on or when it's happening, and we'll put that out. So doing those kind of things at that regulatory level, which can be tedious. I mean, I've been watching some of these, commission meetings, hindsight's 2020, but it can be boring as hell, to be honest. But that's where this stuff happens at, and then a lot of times they're like, flag us, send it to us. If there's something we can do, we will. A lot of times it becomes a manpower thing, being down that far down in the trenches. But we're trying, and that's what we're doing here, is looking to investigate to see what can be done to get this back in 2022. And if not, well, let's coordinate for 2023 and make sure we're nice and loud and we have some arguments and we get all the I's dotted and T's crossed and do everything we can to get it back.
So knowing that you guys are going to remain involved in the Washington issue and keep fighting there, Brian, is there another instance or thing that could happen that's like next up on the radar? Like, this is another really bad thing people should be aware of. Is there something else? Is there a bunch of them? Just to give people like some perspective of like how much is actually going on.
Oh gosh. Well, in Washington, you got the predator stuff that's coming up with wolves and everything, and I think that's going to be probably the next crux and domino that they're going to try to make fall. Nationally, every state has something going on. I mean, we get stuff in, thousands of bills we're combing through. And I think, by the time kind of things hash out and we figure it out, which is which, there will be 600, 500 bills we're monitoring, weighing in on, watching, making sure. But yeah, it's everywhere. And it's everything from trying to remove a season or limiting something, regulating something. Like I said, dogs get regulated a lot. And that's a hard one to kind of wrap your head around, because like nobody wants a puppy mill. Nobody wants to see a dog on a chain for its entire life. Like the Sarah McLachlan videos, you don't want to see that. We don't want to see that. But when you put a tethering law in there and you follow it by the book, by the letter, that's going to impact your houndsmen. That's going to impact your bird dog guys who use drop chains, who are field trialing, who are hunting, who have a string of dogs, and that's how they travel and they put them out. That then becomes the letter of the law. And now all of a sudden what they're doing is illegal. So there's little things like that to big things to closing public lands, gun issues, of course, always. This crux of what we're talking about now is what they're trying to do. We talked about it a little bit before, that they're trying to dilute game commissions and make their voice heard, getting a non-consumptive representative on there, and that can be through lowering thresholds. A lot of game commissions require, out of the last 10 years, you have to have a hunting or fishing license for 5, or you have to be in a business affected by this, or there's a threshold to meet to get on the commission. They're trying to remove those thresholds, or blatantly say expand this where we get 3 non-hunting votes on the commission, and so that's one tactic. They just have an arsenal of tactics that they can use, and by the way things are designed, we're always going to be on defense. Like, things are legal, they're trying to make them illegal. We won't know about it until they take action to make it illegal. Then we have to respond and be boisterous about it and tactical about it.
Yeah, my unfortunate assumption was that this was happening everywhere, but I think it is valuable for people listening to hear you say that.
Mm-hmm.
Big message is just to get involved, let your voice be heard, support organizations that are putting in the work, Sportsman's Alliance being a great example of one of those, or this stuff's gonna keep happening.
Yep. Could not have said that better myself, and I think that's the perfect close, the perfect call to action.
Covered a lot of ground. That was
Yep.
That was an emotional roller coaster.
Big time. And I was probably holding back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, get involved, educate yourself, and make the best decisions possible. Hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed diving into this very, very important topic. If you haven't been getting involved, maybe think about getting involved, and we'll see if we can implement change.
Yeah, I think the big thing with this one is Washington's a really unique example. A lot of really weird things happened in that situation, and I think the main reason for talking about that one specifically was because it was so extreme in its result.
Yes.
to hopefully get the conversation started. So it's not like there aren't other things going on in other states that we in Sportsman's Alliance certainly don't agree with, but I think this seemed like a good example, a high-profile example to really get that conversation started.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this conversation might seem a little bit bleak or depressing at times and a little bit of a downer. But like you said, hopefully we're getting that conversation started. Maybe it'll be a little bit of a kick in the pants to all of us, and we'll activate ourselves more, pay attention more, and be ready for the next one. So, Brian, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for the insight. Thanks for all the hard work that you guys do over at Sportsman's Alliance. And, let's just keep fighting the good fight. And I'm sure we'll probably see you on the next one.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your support, guys.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.